City Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Richard Acritelli, and on today's episode of The Fog of War and Humanity here on HMTV, my special guest from the Office of the Chief of the United States Army Reserve is Mr. Gary B. Port, will join me for a conversation about his military service, his present time as a major figure within the Army Reserves, and his experiences as a lawyer and a local politician. Gary, where did you grow up as a young man, and what were your interests and the occupation of your parents?
I'm from Brooklyn. You got a problem with that?
What part of Brooklyn?
Bensonhurst. Actually, Bensonhurst, Gravesend. I was on the cusp of the two areas.
Okay, I had a family from Sheepshead Bay and Manhattan Beach, and
Yeah, knew the area. I was a Lafayette guy.
it seems like everyone at one time or another was from the city, and they eventually came out to Long Island, right?
Yeah, what happened was back in the early 90s, I was an assistant DA in Brooklyn during the crack crisis, and I got burned out. 2,200 homicides a year. The crime during the 80s, 90s was out of control. And I just said, you know what, I need to get out of the city. And that's what we ended up doing back in 94.
Okay, where did you end up moving to?
We're in West Hempstead.
Okay, West House. Okay, good. Now, when you were younger, what were some of the things that you did growing up in Brooklyn?
Hey, I was a mobile DJ. That's what you did to make money back in the 70s. You spun disco, hit parties, made money on the side, and then went to school.
Where were some of these parties? All over the city?
All over. We did. I did everything from sweet 16s to 60th birthday parties.
Wow. Did your parents get a kick out of that, or?
My parents, they were just happy we were out of the house on the weekends and making money, not bothering them.
Sure. Okay. Now, you're in high school. Did you play any sports, any clubs, anything along those lines?
I was one of the nerds. I was high grades. The only thing I did sports-wise, I did weightlifting in the gym.
Okay. So now you're a sharp kid. You graduate from high school. Where do you end up at?
Oh, NYU. My dad's alma mater, so I went into NYU. And then from there, I went to Brooklyn Law School.
Okay. What did you study at NYU there?
I was a history guy. My folks, I like the ancient world and early American history.
Good. Any one part of early American that you liked?
Antebellum America, I find fascinating.
Okay. Did you do any writing or any research or?
I did a seminar on the Jacksonian era, and I did a paper on the prison reform movement in the 1830s.
Wow. And then later on, I mean, that's going to be a large part of your life is the law, right? And
well, since my dad was a lawyer, my dad was a mob lawyer. As I like to joke, he was a family lawyer. He represented a lot of families, Gambinos, Lucchese's, Gotti's. And he was a mob lawyer, and I grew up around the law. I was constantly in his office. I was going to court with him. So I was very involved in the law. During college, I would work in his office during the summer. So it was a big part of my life.
Now, you have a very easy approach to you. You say it very easily, the families, the mob, the lawyers, this and that. Did your dad have the same kind of tone as you?
Well, that's
he had to have a little bit more seriousness in terms of the people he was dealing with.
It's how I picked it up. My father always brought us around. So I used to go up to Harlem with him to hang out with the Harlem drug lords. I remember having Sunday lunch or dinner at Howard Beach with Carmine Lombardozzi's family. There was Bruno Fagiolo, who had the stable. So I was around all these people growing up. So I had an easy understanding of that lifestyle.
When you observed your dad handling some of these, I guess, delicate figures in terms of how they handled their own business with their own associates, right? Or enemies, right? Was there any one way that you noticed how your dad handled himself that you draw on today within your own practice?
My dad always treated people with respect, honesty, and he was always straightforward. He never lied. He never sugarcoated. He told people the absolute truth. And that, as an attorney, is really important. And dealing with mobsters was also very important because they respected if you spoke to them straight. You spoke to them man to man. And if you did that, you would get the respect. And he also made it very clear where the lines were. He was not going to cross lines. Like the famous mob lawyer Bruce Cutler, He was house counsel. My father never crossed that line. The people that he worked with, the other criminal attorneys he worked with, they would never cross that line. And the mobsters knew that. They knew just where my father would go and no further.
You think that Cutler, because I remember seeing him on all kinds of shows and documentaries, did he go too far over to that side to try to be one of those guys?
According to my father, I didn't know Cutler. I don't think I ever met him. If I did, I don't recall. But my father said the problem with Cutler is, and this is what his words were, Bruce wanted to be one of the mobsters. That's what he felt. And Bruce Cutler, as I recall, and I could be wrong in this, my recollection was he was caught on wires actively counseling people how to break the law and evade the law, which is how he went down.
Wow. So, all right. So you're studying the law. You go to Brooklyn Law?
I went to Brooklyn Law School, yeah.
What were you studying mostly? What was the area that you were majoring in within the law itself?
Well, you don't major when you're going to law school. You start off first year, they give you all the basic stuff, contracts, personal injury, all these different stuff, and you learn basics.
Okay.
Then you go into your electives in the second and third year to try to see what interests you.
Where do you gravitate towards?
I was gravitating towards criminal law. In fact, in my second year, I spent an entire year interning at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York, and actually worked on a major terrorist case, and that was very interesting.
What year was that?
84, 85.
So that's, when was the first World Trade Center? 91?
91 was the worst World Trade.
So you got about 6 years, 7 years before.
Well, these were left-wing terrorists. Which
left-wing, okay.
Yeah, we don't see them anymore. The left-wing terrorists used to be the ones that were the problem. They died out pretty much by the 80s.
What kind of terrorism was that? Like a mail bomb, something like that?
They were called United Freedom Front. They used to rob banks and then use the money to set off bombs. One of the bombs they set off with was at the old Muller Army Reserve Center up in the Bronx.
Wow.
They also killed a New Jersey state trooper. I forget the gentleman's name. He had stopped them as a traffic stop, and they killed him. And there were a few other bombs that they'd put off.
Pretty serious people.
They were not nice folks. And I was working with the U.S. Attorney's Office and hanging out with the FBI Joint Federal Task Force they called it the JTF, the Joint Terrorist Task Force. Real great bunch of guys.
And you were doing that as a young man, right?
Yeah, I was in the second year of law school.
Wow.
So I was probably 22.
So that's one hell of an internship that you had with those guys, right?
It was a real education hanging out with the FBI on this terrorist case. And one of the jobs they had me doing was I was organizing and tagging all the evidence from they had seized all the contents from 5 houses. And I was going through and helping organize all the evidence for that.
Wow. So now you go into your third year, you kind of like the criminal aspect of it?
That's what I thought I was going. And then it was kind of interesting. Third year law school, you start to do interviews. So I was interviewing for the DA's offices. And I see on the list of folks coming to the law school to do interviews was the United States Army. No interest in the Army. Hadn't even given the Army a thought.
Did you have any family in the service?
My father was a World War II veteran.
Okay.
And interesting, since we're in the Holocaust Museum, an interesting side story. He was a Japanese interpreter. They made him a Japanese interpreter for the war. So he was not a slouch. He was an MP branch, military police.
Sharp man.
And as anyone who in the military knows, to go from E1 to E2 to E3, you just have to keep breathing. To go to E4, you have to keep breathing. So this is World War II, about maybe 45, 46, maybe the end of World War II. I forget exactly the date. He's E3. He's been doing his work as a Japanese interpreter at the War Crimes Commissions. And
what was that, in Manila?
He started off in Japan, but he ended up in Manila.
Manila, okay.
And so he would be part of the interviews, interpreting for the interrogations as well as for the trials. So he gets called in his commander's office, and he figures, okay, he's E3, he's going to be made E4 now. It's about time. And his commander says to him, "You're a Jew. I'm not promoting a Jew in my army. Get the hell out of here." So he left the army as an E3.
Look at that anti-Semitism still at the...
Yeah. So now fast forward to me. I hadn't ever really given much thought to the army. So, but I'm looking to see the army was interviewing, and I said to myself, well, good practice. I'll just use this as a practice interview. And the gentleman who interviewed me was the staff judge advocate, the top lawyer over at Fort Hamilton, a guy named Lieutenant Colonel Hawes. 15 minutes. That's all it took him. He changed my life.
Wow.
He recruited me, and I joined the Army. I was...
Did you join at that moment, or did you go home and talk to your father, or?
There was a discussion, but I was sold on it. I thought this was great, and I put my application in because you had to apply, and there was an application process. I was accepted tentatively. You have to actually be admitted to practice law, which meant I had to pass the bar and then be admitted to practice. So 85, they accepted me. I took the bar in 86. I found out that I passed 3 months later, and New York State has a program that if you're going into the military, they will fast track your application into the bar. So I found out in October that I'd passed the bar, and I was admitted to practice probably, I think it was December 7th, 1986, and on December 23rd, Second Circuit Judge Lawrence Pierce swore me in as an officer in the United States Army.
And they swear you, and did you go for your training beforehand, or did you have to do that afterwards? Or?
Oh, God, that was hilarious. Let me explain this. This is a very different world, okay? This is the Cold War Army, 1987. I show up to Fort Lee, Virginia, January 2nd, 1987. There were 70 people in my class. Half the class were ROTC kids. The other half were people like me. Fresh civilian one day, congratulations, first lieutenant, not second lieutenant, first lieutenant the next day. So we went down to Fort Lee, Virginia, where they gave us 2 weeks of military orientation. Okay, boys and girls, we had 5 women in our class. Now the force is more balanced, 50-50, which is much better. But back then we only had 5 women in our class. One of which, by the way, became the Judge Advocate General of the United States Army, Lieutenant General Flora Del Pino.
Senior ranking officer, right?
She was the Judge Advocate General. That was about, I think, 2 back. But anyway, so we show up there, like 70 people, half have an idea what they're doing, half have no clue. They give us 2 weeks of military orientation, how to put on a uniform, how to get a haircut. And then we went, after that, for 3 months at the Judge Advocate General School, which was a school, which still exists, to teach judge advocates how to be judge advocates. It was built for us by the University of Virginia. It literally is across the street from UVA Law School. It is a beautiful building. I think of the rest of the military.
Yeah, that's a great school, a great area. Right? In Lynchburg.
It was amazing.
No, Charlottesville.
Absolutely amazing. The rest of the Army knew about the Army JAG school. They would kill us. It's a gorgeous place. So I spent three months there, and then I went down to Fort Bliss, which is in El Paso, and that's where I spent my active duty time during the Cold War.
Wow. It was a little bit different than being in Virginia?
It was different from being on Long Island. I'm a Brooklyn boy.
Sure.
So here I am in Texas, El Paso, Texas.
You're not getting good pizza down there, right?
Oh, so. not just not good pizza. Imagine you're driving. I'm driving my car, and I'm near about maybe 4 or 5 hours away from El Paso, and I see a sign: next rest stop, 96 miles. I am the only car as far as the eye can see. As a New Yorker, even here in Long Island, can you imagine the next rest stop, 96 miles? Can you imagine not seeing any car at all right to the horizon? It was a culture shock.
Wow. What did you do down there?
They made me a defense attorney. I was with what was called the Trial Defense Service, so I defended soldiers at courts-martials.
Now, were they soldiers just from that area, or were they sent to you from different parts of the country and different bases around the world?
No, the folks that were stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas, as well as White Sands Missile Range, which was 30 miles away. So I had White Sands and Fort Bliss. So we had a very active practice. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so you had some business then, right?
Soldiers, when they're sitting around on base, not out in the field doing work or not at war, get into trouble.
Yeah, they get a little antsy. Yeah.
Alcohol, women, drugs.
Those were the three key things. Anything any more serious than that, or?
There were some serious cases, but for the most part, it was just dumb soldier tricks.
So now, alcohol, women, and drugs, right? What was some of your defense on that?
Well, it depends. I mean, if it was a urinalysis, you try to deal with the lab, because there was a lot of problem with the labs back in the 80s. And a number of times we found that the labs were not doing things properly and had to throw out entire samples. Things were contaminated. DWIs are tougher because of the breathalyzers were pretty solid back then. And then just stupid stuff. I mean, there was just so many stupid things that because you're dealing with, your demographic was 18 to 22. Okay, 18
Very
to 20,
young.
Yeah, they're living in the barracks. They got free money, and it was the Cold War.
And a lot of them away from home for the first time, and
Yeah, I mean, you had some
judgment that wasn't very good, right?
Yeah, let's put it that way. Judgment that was not good.
Okay. All right. So now you're there. Where do you go after Fort Bliss?
Came back home to New York, where I worked in the DA's office in Brooklyn for Joe Hines during the crack crisis.
What was your feeling? Because crack exploded in the 1980s. I mean, not only around here, but all over the country. I mean, it was
one police officer, when I was chatting with him, we were processing an arrest, and he made a comment that every time they arrest someone, they always had a crack file on it. It's like, it was almost mandatory equipment. Crack was so prevalent. I remember when I was living in Dyker Heights at that time, which was around New Utrecht High School, and I would walk down past New Utrecht High School to get the train to go into the municipal building, which is where the DA's office was. And I would walk upon a carpet of crack vials. They actually in Brooklyn had 4 grand juries set aside just for narcotics.
Wow.
I spent 7 months in narcotic grand jury, indicting personally between 5 and 7 cases a day. We had, if memory serves me, we had 12 DAs just in that section, 4 grand juries running all the time, and each of us running between 5 and 7 indictments a day.
And that goes to show the extent of that problem.
It was a nightmare. And
now, what makes a drug take off like that?
that's beyond my pay grade. But I will tell you that it did.
Is it the cost, the ease of getting it? If it blows?
Dude, no idea. I just know that crack exploded, and it created enormous amounts of criminal activity. We had running gun battles on the streets of Brooklyn. Kings County Hospital had a gunshot ward. I actually went there once to do an arraignment. Because if a person was hospitalized and had to be arraigned, we'd bring the judge, the court reporter, court officer, the legal aid, and the DA all out to the hospital to do an arraignment.
Did your military time help you with some of this civilian in terms of dealing with the severity of this problem?
Nah, this was a totally different world.
Different animal.
It was off the hook. And then there's something else that we had, was called a riding DA. Whenever there was a murder, rape, or armed robbery, we would send a DA out to the precinct. And it was a 24-hour shift, so you could start your shift at 12 o'clock and not see the DA's office again for another 36 hours.
Wow.
Just going from precinct to precinct to precinct, processing arrests. And then in the complaint room, you would have 20 DAs, 3 supervisors on 8-hour shifts running for 18 hours. And you could end up, on a given shift, you could end up personally processing 10 to 15 arrests.
And that was
daily.
Was the city able to handle this huge problem?
No, absolutely not. It was insane. Manhattan was running arraignments 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That meant if you got arrested in Manhattan, you could be arraigned at 4 a.m. In Brooklyn, we shut down the courts allegedly at midnight, but sometimes we were so backed up, I found myself arraigning people at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Now, you get a jail sentence at that time?
No, not at that time. That's arraignment. That's the first time
Just
you see
arraignment.
a judge. You got arrested, and you have to see a judge within 24 hours.
No, but when they finally get in trouble and a sentence is severe, where were a lot of these people being sent?
Oh, upstate.
Upstate itself. Wow.
Yeah. That's anytime you get a year or more, you wouldn't stay local at Rikers. Rikers was just holding. When you got sentenced for a year or more, you would go upstate to one of the prisons up there.
Wow. Did you ever do any work with any of those prisons?
No, I was purely the guy down in the city doing
the city.
I was what was called a line DA.
How long did you do this for?
I got burned out after 3.5 years.
I was going to ask you that.
I'll tell you exactly the day I knew I had to leave. I was in my office, and when a cop I know came up to me, and we were just chatting and bullshitting, and he said, I got a really funny story to tell you. This was during a period of time where we were getting a lot of livery cab drivers who were getting murdered. And he says, we had one of those livery cab driver shootings last night, and they had me in the back of the car looking for evidence. And I'm looking at the back of the car, and I see some chiclets there. I pick them up, like, what the hell are these chiclets doing on the bottom? And I realize they're not chiclets. They're the teeth of the guy who got killed.
Jesus.
And he starts laughing. And then I started laughing. And I realized, holy God, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I was so burned out that I said, I got to step back from this.
Now, did you stay within the city itself? Did you transfer to another different type of job? Or?
I tried insurance defense for all of Manhattan, but that didn't do it. So I went to a small general practice firm on the island, and ultimately I ended up doing a lot of divorce work because military people kept coming up to me and saying, "Sir, you're a reserve officer. You know the military retired pensions." Like, well, I'll learn them. So I started doing a lot of divorces for reservists.
And I'm sure you helped out a lot of people in tough situations.
I now, one of the things I do is I try to train other attorneys on how to represent active duty and reserve and guard people, because there are certain nuances to the pay and the retirement and things like that really good matrimonial attorneys do not understand. So I have taught a number of courses on the state level, on the county level, and in the city to matrimonial attorneys to understand how this stuff all works. And now it also is, we have a lot of police officers who are also military, so I now know a lot of New York City police pension plans, and particularly with the NYPD. So I also been training people on how to deal with NYPD and how to deal with NYPD who have a military background.
Wow. So you do a lot for some of the service members indirectly as well, right? I mean, you're helping guys or women in some tough spots, personally.
You don't stop. I mean, right now I'm currently the co-chair of the New York State Bar Association Veterans Committee. And as my predecessor, Chad Lennon, who's a legislator out here in Suffolk.
We're gonna try and get him in. We've been working on that.
Chad's a great guy.
Probably August he'll be in here.
And he just got promoted to lieutenant colonel in the Marine Reserve. So Chad likes to say that veterans law touches all areas of the law. And he's right. Just recently, I did a joint legal program with the Elder Law Committee. We did a joint committee meeting education program with the criminal folks. I've got one coming up with the immigration people. I'm working to get one done with the labor law people. And the elder law people want me to come back again in October to do another different area that relates to what we're doing. In fact, veterans law is so huge, no one person knows everything. In fact, one of the great guys in our area, a guy named Ben Pomerantz. Ben is the deputy counsel to the New York State Division of Veterans Affairs. Ben is amazing. Anyone in the veterans community who works in the veterans community knows Ben Pomerantz. And Ben will get up there and he'll say, everyone thinks I know everything. I know only 5%. And then he'll point to me and says, and Gary knows 5%. And it's a different 5%.
Yeah, you draw on different resources.
But there's so much there. And just as I'm talking about the New York State...
Do you guys work with the Veterans Court at all? Like the Suffolk County chapter of Vietnam Vets, they try to handle some of...
I don't personally work with the Veterans Courts, but the various bar associations, Suffolk, Nassau, we helped set one up in Nassau. The New York State Bar has done work with that. The Veterans Treatment Courts are a very important thing that we need to work with. And it's also part of trying to get attorneys to understand. I set up Hofstra Law School's free veteran legal clinic. And one of the things I was teaching my students is these types of clients are different. They are suffering various forms of mental illness. And if you don't understand how to talk to them, you will never understand how to represent them. And this is particularly important in the veteran treatment courts area. Veterans who have served, who've been in combat, do not talk. You know the guy who was never in combat? He's the guy running around with 4 American flags on his truck and screaming to the world he's a veteran. Okay? You've met those guys too, okay? Pogues, persons other than grunts who go around trying to pretend they're special forces.
Yeah, spooks, right?
However, I've had the distinct honor of meeting a few Medal of Honor winners. And I particularly remember talking to Sergeant Bellavia, and I asked him, I said, because I read his citation, which is amazing. And I said, what were you thinking? And he said to me, if I knew it was on the other side of that door, I wouldn't have gone. Another Medal of Honor winner, whose name escapes me right now, he said, if I'd known what was going to happen that day, I would have stayed in bed. People who are actually in combat, people who have actually seen real terrible things, do not talk about it. They don't thump their chest. They don't act like heroes. To give you an example, I was in a clinic. I was trying to get a soldier an upgrade. Sorry, Marine. I apologize. It was Marine. And for those people who don't understand, don't make that mistake. So this Marine had been in a very bad situation. And I asked him, tell me what happened. He said, well, we were on patrol. We took fire. Then we took shelter in a building. And then it took us a while to get an exfiltration. And then we got out of there. And I looked at him and I said, that's not what happened. And he gives me a blank look. Again, very, what we call flattened effect. Very flattened effect. I said, that's not what happened. Let me tell you what happened. You were on patrol. Suddenly fire starts taking. You guys start panicking like, oh my God, there's fire. What the hell are we doing? What the hell are we doing? Oh my God, look, there's a building. Let's run into that building. He said, yeah, that's kind of what happened. I said, okay, and now you're in the building now and you're taking fire and rolling. And several of your friends got shot, right? Yeah, and you're yelling and screaming, where's the exfiltration team? Where's the exfiltration team? Well, God damn it, get them over here. He said, yeah, that's kind of what happened, yeah. And I was expressing all the emotion to him that he was not expressing to me. And he was just nodding and says, yeah, that's really what happened. But if I had not had the experience of dealing with so many veterans and being able to talk to veterans, even though I've never been in combat, because I walk in as a lieutenant colonel, I walk in with immediate credibility to talk to people. So they know they're talking to Colonel Port. They will start connecting with me on a level if I was not military. And because I've talked to so many, I start to understand. So I then can sort of interpret their flattened emotional effect. Now, this goes back to the Veteran Treatment Court. You know, you have a guy who, say, got picked up for a gun. Well, why'd you have a gun? I had to. Now, for a civilian, they don't understand what that means. But when I hear a story like that, I think, hypervigilance, PTSD. He can't leave the house without a gun because of what happened to him over there.
What his experiences were in the service.
Right. So training attorneys to understand how to deal with their clients. We have a lot of guys who self-medicate. I had a friend of mine who described PTSD as you have a box and you're trying to get everything in the box. And you keep trying to put stuff in the box, you can't get everything in the box, so you go paint the house. It's an inability to cope with stress in an appropriate fashion. So when you have PTSD, if you are not functioning properly, you have maladaptive behavior. You'll drink, you'll withdraw, you'll lose your temper. Everyone's PTSD is different. So now you're representing a guy who's an alcoholic. And you ask him, you know, what do you do for a living? I do this and that. I was an electrician for a while. I did some roofing. Well, before that, I was in the service. Well, where were you? Well, I was in Iraq. And what happened there? And it takes you time to pull it out, and then you start to realize what's going on. I had a guy who was a combat medic, probably one of the most second most profoundly messed up human being I ever met.
And where was he?
He was in Iraq.
He was in Iraq.
Now, for those people who don't know combat medics, they don't get involved in combat. They deal with the after effects, and it ain't pretty. So he told me a story, very flat.
And they're trying to preserve life, and they
see horrible stuff. So he was telling me, there were two stories he told me, and very dead effect. Well, we came across a person, he was in the river, and we took him out of the river. So I asked him, well, what was the condition of the body? It had been there for a few days. Was it all together? It was missing the head. How hot was it? About 140 degrees.
So you're pulling very serious information.
And this took 2 hours, by the way. I was with another professor, Professor Dollinger. She was in tears by the time we finished. And then he told another story about coming across a group, a family that had been burned to death. I won't go into the details of that.
And this was in Iraq as well?
And drawing these things out. So now you are trying to represent these guys at a criminal proceeding, trying to explain to the judge, Judge, my guy had a gun because, or my client was DWI because, or he was using drugs because. Sure. But the problem you as the attorney have, if you don't know how to talk to them, if you don't understand how to question the silence. See, when you talk to a normal...
And extract that information.
Right. When you talk to a normal client who has no mental illness problems, no problems like that, he's like, dude, tell me what happened. I was at the bar with my friends. We were watching the game, and, one thing led to another, and, I had about 10 beers. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I can understand that. But you talk to a veteran, he's not going to tell you everything. And he's not going to tell you about his combat.
You think because they just don't want to relive it again, right?
I found when I was a young soldier back in the 80s, I always found that the Vietnam veterans were the guys that spoke the least. And I found that very interesting. People who were in combat tend not to talk. That's how you know the guy was in combat. Guys who talk about their military career and pat themselves in the back, yeah, they've never seen combat.
Yeah.
Guys who've seen combat,
say little.
Say very little.
All right, please rejoin us here at the Fog of War and Humanity on HMTV.